Hello and welcome to all my Dark Souls out there seeking communion. I am Remo Yesman, and today I would like to talk to you guys about one of the best Souls games you'll probably never play, and that is the original Dark Souls. The original Dark Souls is probably one of the most important games in the Souls series, and it is also one of the most beloved games in the series. And when you look at player counts for the original Dark Souls will always beat out Dark Souls 2 in terms of player popularity, and it will regularly compete with Dark Souls 3, with Dark Souls 3 usually hovering around 7,000 to 10,000 players, and Dark Souls 1 hovering around 2 to 3,000 players regularly. And that should speak to how popular this game is. And I know that may not sound like much, but you gotta remember these are single player games that came out a while ago. And so for so many players to be ready to return to Lodran should speak to how good Dark Souls really is. Establishing the Souls genre. Dark Souls was the first game in the Souls series that was not a PlayStation exclusive. And seeing as Dark Souls was not a PlayStation exclusive, as you can imagine, many more people got to experience Dark Souls than got to experience Demon Souls. And considering the fact that Sony themselves admit they criminally mismanaged the Demon Souls IP, it's a good thing that Dark Souls was not a Sony exclusive. Dark Souls is the second game in the Souls series, but it is considered by many to be one of the greatest games of all time, and it is considered by many to best represent the full essence of what a Souls game truly is. Dark Souls established the reputation of Hidetaka Miyazaki as a game creator with the highest integrity, quality, and consistency. For a time, fans, critics, and other game companies took notice of From Software and their games that they developed. A faithful following began to emerge, and the word Souls game began to have meaning. Dark Souls is the game that firmly established the reputation of both Hidetaka Miyazaki and From Software, but to appreciate the full story, we have to begin with the failure that was Demon Souls. The failure of Demon Souls. Demon Souls released on February 5th, 2009 in Japan to disappointing sales. It underperformed and did not meet the financial expectations of Sony, who funded the game and published it in Japan. Miyazaki had a feeling that this would be the last fantasy game he would be making for From Software. He lost his chance. He would have to go back to making games for mecha robots. Miyazaki. During the period when we had just completed development, the evaluation and sales forecasts within From Software were not good, so I did not even imagine that I could be given another chance to develop a similar game again. Null Insight states, however, this would not stay long as Western audiences began to discover Demon Souls. The success of Demon Souls. Even though Demon Souls was released exclusively for Japan, many Western critics, players, streamers, and YouTubers imported the game, and it started to have a reputation as one of the hardest games on PS3. Through word of mouth, word of the game spread, and soon players were requesting an official release in the West. Atlus and Bandai Namco grabbed this opportunity, and with that, the sales of Demon Souls exploded. Where is the Demon Souls sequel? With the success of Demon Souls, you may ask, where is the sequel, and how does Dark Souls fit into the story? The key to understanding is that the initial failure of Demon Souls removed any chance of From Software making a sequel within that time frame. Sony gave up entirely on the Demon Souls franchise and would not even publish it outside of Japan. It is only through Atlus and Bandai Namco that Western releases became possible. Even Sony president Shuhei Yoshida admitted this, as Yoshida went on to state, "In my personal experience playing Demon Souls when it was almost final, I spent about 2 hours playing it And after all that time, I was still stuck at the beginning of the game. I told myself, this is crap. This is an unbelievably bad game. So I stopped and I put it aside. We underestimated the quality of Demon's Souls, and to be honest, the media in Japan did the same. We definitely dropped the ball from a publisher's perspective, including the studio management side of things. We were not able to grasp the value of the product we were making. The birth of Dark Souls. So the main question now is, what was Miyazaki doing between the period when Demon's Souls was considered a failure and when it became a success? This is where the story of Dark Souls comes into play. The period we are referring to above is around 8 months from February 2009, the Japan release, to October 2009, the USA release. Within those 8 months. Within those 8 months, Miyazaki and his team started working on a game that was very similar to Demon's Souls, but they were not able to call it a sequel as the IP of Demon's Souls belonged to Sony. With Bandai Namco as their partner, From Software was creating a new Souls game, and this new Souls game would become known as Dark Souls. Miyazaki. Dark Souls development began after some time had passed since the release of Demon's Souls. Back then, Demon's Souls still wasn't appreciated in Japan or globally yet. That happened later. The worldwide release of Demon's Souls happened after that. The reviews were being created at the end of the year and it won some awards, but development for Dark Souls had already begun by then. One thing that's worth noting is that Miyazaki started development for Dark Souls when it was still in the context of a developer who had failed in his first Dark Fantasy attempt. So one could say that this was a pure leap of faith on the side of From Software to let him create another game that had the template of a previously failed game. Extremely challenging, punishingly difficult, obscured game mechanics, implicit storytelling, etc. And the primary motivation of Miyazaki in pursuing this at the period of time when he had thought to have failed in his first try is to turn into reality all the new ideas he and his team had realized as they were making Demon's Souls. Miyazaki. At the start, it was more of the developers wanting to make a sequel, and we were not anticipating many sales for Demon's Souls. We did not want to let the game die, but we could not get more sales. Later on, we began to get really positive feedback and the mood started to change around us, but never to a go, go, go situation. We did not expect to have this much fame, and development is expensive, but when the positive reviews came in, we were like, oh, we get more funding and time to develop? It was exhilarating, but anyway, we were conservative. Similar, but not a sequel. In many interviews explaining the origins of Dark Souls, Miyazaki emphasized that this is not a sequel. Of course, he should, as the game is a new IP of Bandai Namco, and both companies would get in legal trouble with Sony if that is not made clear. Miyazaki. Dark Souls is not a sequel to our previous game Demon's Souls by any means. However, it is developed by the same producers and director, and so certain ideologies, ideas, and themes have carried over and are similar. It is an entirely new game with similar concepts. Origins of the title, Dark Souls. At the start of product development, Miyazaki wanted the title of the game to be Dark Race. He would not want to use Souls anywhere in the title, as that would remind people of Demon's Souls and it would make the explanation harder with regards to whether the new game is a sequel or not. So the title Dark Race solves possible legal issues as well as differentiates the game from its predecessor. However, Miyazaki later found out that Dark Race has some racist implications. While searching for a better title, they started using the codename Project Dark. Miyazaki. Initially, before the Tokyo Game Show in 2010, I planned to name it Dark Race. This time, the player has a situation of being cursed, and that guy belongs to the Dark Race. However, there was a discussion of the possibility of a discriminatory context overseas, and while thinking that might be the case, we only had 2 days left until the game show. Null Insights. Miyazaki continued searching for a fit for a new title for his new game. The two candidates he came up with was Dark Lord and Dark Ring. He could not proceed with Dark Lord as someone else already owned the trademark, and with that, it was Dark Ring, but Dark Ring had an even worse connotation than Dark Race. Miyazaki. Dark was confirmed as part of the title of Project Dark, and both Dark Lord and Dark Ring were nominated. We could not get the trademark for Dark Lord, but we did for Dark Ring, so it was decided by then. However, at the start of the year, we learned that Dark Ring means anus. It was said to mean anus in British slang, so they did not end up going with Dark Ring. The creation of the Dark Souls prototype. Unlike Demon Souls, Dark Souls has a well-documented prototype. Miyazaki and his team first created the prototype before creating the whole game. Later on, they would reuse as much as possible from it, even putting the entire prototype world in the main game. The prototype area. If you would like to imagine what the prototype area of Dark Souls looks like, just visit the painted world of Aramis. Miyazaki. We prepared a lot of concept art for the painted world. It was actually based on a map we used for the Dark Souls prototype. We worked and spent a lot of time and effort on this prototype, as it was our only means to truly convey our vision for the game. So much so that we didn't want any of it to be wasted, and we planned to use it in the actual game. However, I could not find a way to fit it in, so in the end, I cheated and I placed it inside the painted world. A prototype boss. And if you would like to see and fight the original boss of Dark Souls prototype, just take a visit to Nito's domain. Miyazaki. Nito was originally designed and created as the boss of the prototype map, so we gave him a vast range of attacks and effects. We were constantly discussing what color he should be and how he should look. The release week. To get the context of how successful Dark Souls is compared to Demon Souls, let us compare the first week's earnings of the two games. In Demon Souls' first week in Japan, it moved only 39,000 units, while when Dark Souls released, Dark Souls would move 279,567 units alone in its first week in Japan. In fact, Dark Souls was so successful it was able to outsell Demon Souls' first year international sales in just 1 week in Japan. Miyazaki. It was truly a big surprise for me because I did not expect this success at all. You could imagine how unpredictable it was, and I could not exactly describe it. Just saying, it was a huge surprise to me. Possible DLC to Dark Souls. Miyazaki initially shared that they did not have any plans for any DLC for Dark Souls, but there are some rumors. Could it be that there is a hidden Dark Souls expansion? Miyazaki. Even if there is to be a sequel to Dark Souls, it is uncertain whether I will be selected to get involved in the development since the decision maker is not me. I better not comment on uncertainty. If I reveal my unwarranted opinions here, the management may scold me. And let's be honest guys, We all know how Dark Souls 2 turned out because Miyazaki was not working on it. And to be honest, people hate on Dark Souls 2, but I actually think the game is perfectly fine. Dark Souls would go on to receive critical acclaim and is often cited as one of the best games of all time. By 2023, the series has shipped over 35 million copies outside of Japan. And even with all that success, with the rise of Elden Ring, Dark Souls still finds itself fading into obscurity as one of the best Souls games that most people probably will never play. Anyway, guys, that's gonna wrap up this video. Likes, comments, subs are all appreciated. The next Dark Souls video is gonna be a full story and lore breakdown. Those videos are usually around 2 hours long, so if you're into stuff like that, maybe stick around and hit that sub button. And anyway, the best thing you can do for me at this point is just to have a beautiful day. Peace.